Devil in a black cloak, street gospel, light of the temple. Sword swing, killer live from the ghetto. The hood messenger, let them know hell's close. Black burial, the devil in a black cloak.
Yo, what is up? Welcome to the Street Gospel Podcast. I'm your host, Dave One. And this is episode number... Hey, Cam, what episode is this? What do you know? Cam's not here today. So this is episode number 35. And usually Cam is here helping me out on the podcast. But Cam couldn't make it because he had to work. So he's at work. He'll probably come in here late. My guess, we were kind of working out this schedule a little bit. And we got a schedule. So I had to book him because he has some things coming up. I have some things coming up. So I just said, let's do it. So Cam made sure I'm good. I hope I'm good on all the video here and everything. Be ready to go. But I want to thank everybody for checking out episode number 34 with Phil Aguilar. Definitely was a very, very good episode. Interesting. Got a lot of good feedback on that one. I did get some naysayers. You know, they had some things to say about Phil. But for the most part, there was a lot of good response to that episode, and we appreciate it. So once again, check us out, Street Gospel Podcast. We're on every podcast platform. And check us out on YouTube. We have video of all our podcasts. Check us out on YouTube at Street Gospel TV. But now we got to get into our guest. Very happy to have him. And you know how we always got to play a little bit of music for my guest. Little introduction. So this guy right here is a believer. He's a husband, a father, a grandfather. I think 3 times over.
3 times.
He's a missionary. He's retired, worked forever for the same company forever, but he wanted to continue to help people, so he took up a side job at a mortuary. So he's working at a mortuary now. He's a really great story, and I thought it would be interesting to have him. He's a sports fan, particularly the Dodgers, so I'm wearing my Dodger hat today. Hopefully they win. We'll see. But without further ado, I want to introduce my guest to the podcast, Trino Jimenez.
Thank you, Dave. It's good to be here.
What is up, man?
Well, here we are.
I know. I wanted to get you here, and I know we were going back and forth on a little bit of text, and even today there was a little bit of a conflict, and
right.
You worked it out. But I appreciate you coming in, man.
Yeah. This is a perfect episode 35. It's 35 years ago that my brother had passed away, so it's just fitting. That number is a fitting number.
Yeah, and I wanted to. That is pretty fitting. It's weird that happens that way. I've had guests and their, whether it's their age or certain numbers where they just fit in. I had the guy that he was a big Kobe fan, and he came in. He was I think 24. He was episode number 24, and then I had a guy that was a big Jordan fan from Chicago, episode 23. So definitely episode 35, I guess, is a little bit fitting for why we got you today. Yeah. So first off, you know, I always like to have guests and that have a story. The podcast is a story of I always sum it up as a story of overcoming or there's some sort of battle and then a victory, or it's a struggle, but it's something that somebody has overcame. And I knew your story, but I didn't know it in detail. And I know you shared with me a few things about it, and I think the last time you talked about it, it wasn't. We'll get into it, but it wasn't as complete as it is now. I think you were working through some things still with it, but I wanted to bring you on because this story is a story of a lot of tangibles here, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, there's anger, there's hate. Yep. There's some remorse, some forgiveness, some uncertainty. You know, there's a couple of things I didn't really realize, but I read the article, and it's funny because I read an article in the LA Times about you, and there was a lot of things in that article I really didn't comprehend or think about. But let's start from the beginning. Tell the audience kind of where you grew up and how you grew up.
Sure. We grew up in Huntington Park. Florencia was a big gang in our neighborhood. I had my uncle, my cousins, and my brothers were all into the gang life. And I got saved at the age of 12. So the way I describe myself is that God spared me from that lifestyle, that I didn't have to live that way. Because the gang life, it kind of gives you two possibilities: is going to prison or dying young, and all the guys that sign up for it, they're okay with those conditions.
So I know the story, but the Huntington Park area is in that Florence area is notorious for gang culture.
Yeah.
And your family was ingrained in that culture because you were around it every day, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so your older brother, he was from the neighborhood.
Yes.
And I know how many brothers
there's four of us.
Four of you guys, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So your oldest brother is from the neighborhood.
Yeah, my two oldest brothers.
Where do you fit in the line again?
I'm the youngest of four.
So you're the youngest.
Yeah.
So you said that you gave your life to the Lord at 12.
12 years old.
So you were kind of just, I don't want no part of that lifestyle.
Pretty much, yeah. I feel like every now and then, like there was this big sign with the South Side, and all the dudes, all the old guys from Florence are kind of validating me, and it's like, no, that's not me.
Right.
So I didn't even want to take a picture in that setting. You know,
it wasn't your thing.
It's not. Yeah. It's not my identity. It's, and I'm not going to pretend something I'm not. So
were you kind of, because when you have an older brother that's from the neighborhood, it kind of go either way, right? You either you're going to be like him or you go totally opposite him.
Pretty much, yeah.
Is that what happened?
Pretty much, yeah. And then we have a cousin that's well known and respected, and kind of throws everything to another level. And even my uncle, I think, was really well respected.
Really?
Yeah.
So pretty much the church saved you, kept you busy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of where I found identity. I mean, I found identity in Christ and in my service to the Lord.
That's huge because I'm sure your family found identity in the neighborhood, sure, right? I mean, that's kind of.
Yeah. I think we all seek identity. Yeah.
Right. I think that's huge because if you look at young guys when they get into gang or whatever, maybe some other culture, not really good. They end up being just they're probably good kids at one point and just no identity,
right?
Nothing to really do. I think maybe I know you had your mom and dad at home. That probably helped. A lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
And then you had some older brothers that kind of guided you the right way a little bit.
Yeah. I mean,
kind of kept you away from that.
Yeah, my dad was a Korean War veteran, so he had some. I mean, what they call PSD today. He was declared bipolar. He had drinking issues. He had coping issues. I mean, he had two personalities that was real clear with my dad. So growing up with that was a little tough, but overall, there was nothing as like child molesters or anything like that. So I look at myself as like, wow, we grew up in a pretty solid home.
Yeah. I love your dad. I remember, he's gone home to be with the Lord, but I remember one day I was driving and, I think we had a job at Whittier Presbyterian and I seen him on the bus stop. Yeah. And so I pulled over. I go, where are you going? I'm going down here. He was going to the bank.
Yeah.
He's taking the bus to the bank and I go, I'll give you a ride. So he jumped in and I gave him a ride. And then, I went to church with him for a while. He was always fun. He always loved the kids, but he was always around and the kids loved him. He was funny.
Yeah.
Veteran, had a million war stories, right? Yeah. It's so funny because he was a war veteran, but he was like the smallest guy you ever seen. Like he was super short and small. Yeah. Maybe when he was younger, he probably had some stature on him or something, but he was super, super small.
Yeah, that's what I got to look forward to.
You inherited one of his traits there.
Yeah.
But so I know you as a person that has, and personally, we've been friends for a long time, but I've always known you as a person that was a giver, kind of mild-mannered, funny too, a sense of humor. I think I made you laugh a few times, but you have this characteristic. Even now, with working at the funeral home, it seems like that's just like suited for you. Like that's like perfect for what you do, and you're serving people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean that has to be rough.
Yeah, it's I feel I just kind of hit me just recently that my healing journey, I think it's made pretty much a full circle, because after my brother's death, I'd struggle with funerals. There was times that I'm sitting in the back and it's like, nah, I'm good. I don't even want to approach the casket. And other times I feel like, you know what, I'm going to look at death and I'm going to look at it in the face. And now it's every day. I mean, we're right in the mix of it, so I really feel my journey has taken me to a place where had I not gone down this road, I probably wouldn't be able to do a job like this.
It's weird how that works, because you. I always say like Lord, like why did you choose me for my dad to die so young? And then I run into guys all the time that their fathers pass away.
Yeah.
Or I'm able, or their mother, or their child.
Yeah.
And I'm able to really speak into their lives, or help them, or encourage them. Even recently with my uncle and
Right.
and our friend Vince, that passed away, and their family, and I had them calling me, and asking for, what do you
Right.
do, or how do you do this, and things like that. And it's I get mad at the Lord in a way, because I'm like, okay, Lord, like I'm happy that I can help these people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's in a negative. It's in a negative.
I wish
sense,
I wouldn't
right?
have to be there.
Yeah. Why did you pick me to be the guy?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But there is some, I guess, a very small consolation prize to be able to say, to help somebody through that, right?
Yeah. No, I would describe it like a huge reward. I mean, it's 35 years ago when my brother was murdered. I mean, there was deep scar, deep pain. There was trauma, definitely trauma. I mean, I was traumatized, so there's a lot of pain, and then the anger was pretty deep too.
So your brother, he was in the streets from the neighborhood. Tell us how he was murdered. Well, you know what? Before you didn't tell us about your brother.
Okay.
What kind of guy was he?
Yeah, well, he was 7 years older than me, so he was the oldest of four. He had I don't know what year, if it was 76 or 78 Monte Carlo. Might have been even 77, but it was in that era.
The classic.
Yeah, definitely the
shape
classic.
one, yeah.
And he loved this car. It was actually my dad's car that had bought it. My dad handed it down to my brother. And I think that car just really encompasses my brother. I mean, they would say Julio with the Monte Carlo, the blue Monte Carlo. So yeah, everybody knew. I mean, and the other thing about my brother is he would raise pigeons, homing pigeons, and there was those pigeons that would tumble from the sky and do all kinds of
Be clapping outside.
Yeah, all kinds of tricks, and I don't even know if that's natural to the birds or if it's taught. I don't know.
I've seen them get trained on that.
Yeah, so. But he was really big on his pigeons. That was a big thing, And being that he was 7 years older than me, I was a little kid, and he'd do stuff, to torment me.
Like every big brother?
Like he one time had a shovel and found some dead mice, and he's chasing me through the house. And the more terrified I get, the more he would taunt me, And then there was those big... we call them potato bugs.
Oh, those are ugly.
Yeah,
those things are made of nightmares.
Yeah,
right there.
and I was terrified of those things, man. And he would find those and again chase me around the house, And I play into it because I would be terrified, And I remember one time he was working, and I finally got him with the water hose, and I'm wetting my brother. And for the first time, I felt like, okay, I got one on him. And he just ran through the water. He was full of mud, and he put all that mud all over me. And it's like, man, he got me again,
Wow.
So there was that age gap, and that's probably what makes it really hard for me, because I was coming of age when my brother died. I had just turned 18. I feel like that age gap, from the little kid to the young man, there was a big age gap. But, as I entered into that young man and becoming a man, that age difference and that gap closes. We can have adult conversations, and I never really had that chance with my brother because he was taken from us.
Yeah, that's tough. You get to the age where you're like well, I'm grown. He's respecting me now.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I respect my brother. He's a man, you know, and now we can have these big boy conversations or manly conversations, you know, and
and I get to enjoy that with my other brother, Saul. I mean, we do have some really good, deep conversations, you know. So, and that's kind of my example because he was 5 years older than me, and there was that gap there too. But I saw that gap close with him.
Yeah, that's good. So your brother was murdered, and that's kind of the story of that's pretty remarkable. But how was your brother murdered?
He had a drug problem, and the drug that he struggled with was PCP, and I don't know if he let his guard down. I mean, I've heard different scenarios but my brother ended up going to the projects on 53rd and Compton. So when we lived on 57th and Pacific. You know, so from Pacific Boulevard to Compton Avenue, it's a short drive. I mean, you're talking about a 5-minute drive.
Right.
But for me, it's like, man, that's a whole different world out there, you know, because you start seeing all these projects and, you know, just the way people live is not the way we lived, you know, and just, it's crazy to think that just right around the corner from where we were at, you know, here was these housing projects. And
it's funny to think that because, you know, I said this in the last podcast, when you're young, just a few blocks seems like a whole different world.
Yeah.
And when you're young, you don't really go too many places, right? You stay in your little neighborhood, you go to the same spots, and then you go outside, and it's like a whole nother world.
Right. Yeah. But that was like a whole another world because, again, the way people lived, my mind couldn't process. You know, I had never seen nothing like that, you know. So I think for my brother to go there, I mean, like I said, I've heard different twists and different ideas of people. For example, that it was like a black neighborhood and that they offered, you know, better stuff for your money and stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's accurate or what, but I kind of feel like my brother let his guard down because he went to a neighborhood and a people group that wasn't our people.
Right. Which, I mean, it wasn't acceptable in those days, right? It was, you just stay within your, especially if you're from a gang in those days, you don't associate with anybody outside of your gang or outside of your race, especially.
Right.
You know, so he goes to the projects and.
Yeah. And, I don't know if there was something formulated at the time, you know, to rob his car and to kind of set up my brother. But that's basically how it went down. It looked like there was a plan done like maybe a week before, and it just didn't happen. Because I'd heard the account. I've heard it actually in two places, but I heard it from my sister-in-law when it first happened, and then I heard it from the man himself. But I think he wanted to. My brother was known for running out of gas, and always ran out of gas. And he this particular time he was out of gas, and this guy, you know, goes up to the car and you know, kind of sees what's happening. But he noticed that my sister-in-law and my two nephews were in the car. So, you know, he made a decision that he's like, you know, I'm not gonna bring harm to the innocent. You know, so I think in his mind, or the street mentality is, you know, if I attack you we're one-on-one. You know, it's an even fight. I mean, you know, you have a right to defend yourself, and if you overpower me, then you overpower me. But you know, to the women, they kind of look at them a little more vulnerable, and so there's those street codes, you know.
Right.
Yeah. And when I had heard that, it kind of like, okay, I get it, you know.
Yeah.
I get it. But you know, something when he was telling me that story, what we call our facilitator, you know, and she kind of played the middle person between both of us. She said, "Hey, pause right there. Stop."
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
All right.
We'll get to
that's
that.
a pretty good, story. Yeah.
So he goes to the projects. Does he gets murdered in the projects?
Yes.
Maybe a robbery. Something.
Yes.
Not real clear on that yet.
Yeah.
But he gets murdered pretty brutally, from what I read in the article. Right.
Yeah.
And in those, I mean, it was a bumper jack.
Bumper jack. Right.
In those days, was common.
Right.
Right. In those days, we would hear, he got bumper jacked, or they bumper jacked their car, or whatever. And for those people out there, the bumper jack, it wasn't like the car jacks you have now.
Right.
You know, these are long metal, and they would hook up to your bumper basically, and they were really they were really primitive.
Yeah, it was like a I would describe it like a square pipe. I mean, basically.
Yeah, it's square tubing, metal tubing, and it had like a good weight on top of it, because that was the part that kind of connected to your bumper, and you would have connected to this little plate on the ground,
right?
A base, basically. Stick your tire iron in there and just crank it up. But that long piece, it's got to be 3 feet long with a big piece of metal on the end of it, right?
Yeah, I wonder if the car manufacturers discovered, or it became unpopular, that it became a weapon, an accessible weapon.
Maybe. I mean, the thing was pretty unsafe. I mean, I had an older car one time, got a flat tire in my Malibu, put that on the bumper, you know, this is great. And that thing was wobbling. It was windy, and the car it never set right on that thing.
Yeah, it almost seemed like it can topple over.
Exactly. Somebody come push it, or the wind blows. Right. If you're on the freeway, it's just gonna topple over. But it was a rugged piece of metal.
Yeah.
And your brother got beat with that?
Correct.
Oh.
Yeah.
To the point of death with that bumper jack?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, from when I remember, we had so much death in our family that we had a family mortician. It was Bill Cunningham in Huntington Park, and he got into politics. So he was, the city council mayor. The whole
on
thing.
Gage.
Yes, on Gage. Gage in Seville.
I think if you lived in Southeast LA, you've been there a few times.
Yeah, so
right?
he became like a family friend.
Yeah.
But my dad and my uncle had gone in and seen my brother, and I can only imagine what my dad. I don't even know how that went, But when me and Robert went, Mr. Cunningham covered the top of his head.
Robert, your other brother.
My brother Robert. Yeah. So him and I went in, and for me, seeing my brother wasn't so much that I wanted to see what was done to my brother. It was more of I think coming to that process of reality of what's before me. So without hesitation, when he had offered me and Robert, like, hey, this is going to be a closed casket, but we're going to give you an opportunity. It was without hesitation, that we went in. And like I said, for me, my personal agenda was to, I think, be able to process what's before me.
When did you first get the news that he had passed?
It was the next morning, the very next morning.
You guys just didn't...
A detective came.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was tough because we were worried. I think my sister-in-law, my mom, it was my sister-in-law that wanted my brother Robert to call his workplace, and they verified that he was at work. So he didn't come home all night. They verified that he's at work. And then a detective's probably about noontime coming over.
So they gave you the wrong information, the job?
Workplace, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was, obviously the shock is there, so... it's just the disbelief is there. I mean, and my brother had a tattoo. He had a butterfly tattoo on his wrist right here, and the detective right away says, "Well, does he have?" He right away said like an identifying mark, and saying, "This is your brother." I mean, he already knew 100%.
And what is, not to dive too deep in there, but what is a home like after a detective comes and tells you that information?
Yeah, it's devastating. And then I think my mom had to locate my dad and give him the news. And those were the days that we had track school. So I know I was off track. It was late February when this happened. And I just remember, being present. And it's kind of weird because there's a lot of stuff that's a very clear memory. And a lot of stuff that happened in 1986, my mind is just blacked it out. I mean, for example, I was in, Pastor David Hernandez is pastor in Cerritos. Him and Esther, I was in their wedding, and I literally have no memory. And it was in 2016, they were celebrating 30 years, and I walk into their celebration, and I knew Robert was their best man, my brother Robert, and I'm looking at their photo album because they had it on display. And it was the weirdest thing, man. I'm seeing my picture there, and I'm in there in the tuxedo, and I'm thinking like, man, that's like a double almost, So it was like an out of body experience.
Like it's in a daze.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I have no memory that I was in his wedding, and so that was the reality, I think, of what the trauma I had gone through, So there's a lot of stuff that's just my mind just blacks out.
And what was the you had older brothers Saul was a street guy too, right? Your older brother.
Right.
What was there had to be some anger.
Yeah, well, he was in jail at the time.
Well, might have been good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Because he's a little intimidating looking guy. Even when I was a kid, I remember him, and he didn't look nice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our family's not known to back away from things like that.
And so, did the detective know right away what the circumstances and why your brother was murdered? Did they have a sense right away?
I don't think so. No.
So they had to do a whole investigation.
Sure. Yeah, and then I think the person responsible wasn't apprehended at that time. But what I remember is that detective, he was with us through the whole thing. I mean, even to the sentencing and everything, which probably took place about 2 years after.
Wow.
So he was committed. He was committed.
And you talked about in the article how, you were already a believer, been in church for a while. I remember those days. You were always around. But you talked about in that article about the hate that started to well up
right
in you.
Yeah.
And to me, I don't think you were ever that person prior to that. You always seemed like a not a go-lucky, goofy guy, but hey, a very happy young guy, teenage guy. I remember, seeing you around. I was younger than you, but and it didn't seem like you were, angry. I mean, but in the article, you mentioned that you get very angry, and even to the point of angry at a certain race, right?
Yeah, our family, I think that's kind of one of our traits, is that there's a short fuse. So I was always afraid of that person, and I didn't want to be that person. So that was always a concern in my walk with the Lord. So I think I kind of shifted all the way to the other side, to like the other extreme of kind of just being a doormat almost, and because I was afraid of that person to come out. But I had a lot of struggles with the black race.
It was an African American.
Yes.
That killed your brother. Did you? How fast after the murder did you find out that it was?
I want to say probably within a week they apprehended him. Yeah.
So they knew they knew right away.
Yeah, he was arrested in a stolen vehicle, and a different one, and I think that bumper jack was in the trunk of that car. Oh. And there was evidence. I mean, pieces of my brother's scalp and stuff like that, and his DNA was all over. So yeah. Was
there a sense of release? Of relief that they caught him, or was it just like whatever, man? My brother's gone. What does it matter?
Yeah, I think a lot about families that don't have somebody getting arrested for a crime that was done to their loved one. So I think it puts us in a different category, and I think there is that form of like there's going to be justice.
Yeah, because now you can blame somebody, right? Now you could.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a face behind the crime and the harm and the violations. I mean, because it's the way I see it is no human has a right to take another life, and yet it's such a common thing, and it's just a huge violation that affects so many lives. I mean, you're talking about, we use a term like the ripple effect, that it impacts, like it impacted my parents, it impacted my brothers, it impacted my brother's wife, the children, and then when you got the cousins, the uncles, the friends, the neighbors, and then you got the whole community. I mean, South Central is known for what? It became a place that's known for its violence.
Right.
So it impacts a community. I mean, it has just like a huge impact and a huge ripple effect.
I never thought about this. I knew it was two different races, but that in the neighborhood, that's very huge, and that's very dangerous, right?
Very huge.
I mean that can cause. You talk about a ripple effect of hurt with the families, but a ripple effect of communities and gang neighborhoods.
Right.
That becomes very dangerous. I mean, even to this day, you know, there's. I mean, I think it's toned down a little bit, but there's been times where the African American race and the Mexican race have been on site basically, and they have these rules that on site, if you see whoever, you know, then it could be a young guy that just lives in South Central, you know,
right. Somebody's
younger brother such as yourself, and
right.
they get murdered for this, you know.
Yeah.
It had to have a bigger impact on the neighborhood, right?
Yeah. And actually, my two brothers were from a gang clique. It was called Los Diablos, and the president of Los Diablos, right after my brother Julio's death, there was like a response, and he took out 2 black guys. And but the crazy part was that it was like in a whole other neighborhood. I think it was like the Lenox area. I mean, we're talking about, you know, the south side of Los Angeles.
It's
and
way
Lenox.
over.
Yeah, it's like, so for me, it's like, man, this doesn't bring no closure. If anything, I felt angry. You know, it's like, man, if we're going to go after a target, then you go after, you know, the person responsible, not just a random person, you know. But again, that's the lifestyle that they're immersed into.
Yeah, it's a hate, you know, that overcomes them.
Yeah.
I mean, I trip out on you saying that, you know, where you're like, hey, if you're gonna go get somebody, then get the right guys. I mean, that's not the Trino I know. You know what I mean? And to kind of die, I understand it where it's coming from, but how long did you have that hate?
I'm gonna say it took me to the mid '90s.
So it ran a
good 10 years. Good 10 years.
Oh.
Yeah. And a good 10 years of just struggling, you know, because I think the Christian side of me is warring that, you know, certain feelings are not right, you know. I mean, now we're kind of crossing the lines of prejudice or you know, even a form of racism.
Because you're still living in the area.
Yeah.
So it's fresh every time.
Yeah. But one thing for me is that, you know, never acted out. I mean, I never did any violent act. I think I'm guilty of having violent thoughts, but never, you know, committed any acts or never brought any harm to anybody. You know, so, you know, the crazy part of all this is that name of this person responsible was like embedded in my mind, and that's something that I never forgot. And yet, a lot of guys in the neighborhood didn't even know that somebody was arrested and held accountable. So you look at the picture going back from the very beginning, this man was under God's protection plan, you know, which is incredible, you know.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, because he gets arrested, he gets sentenced.
Yeah.
What did he get sentenced for?
So
I mean, how many years or what was his sentence?
26 to life. Originally, this was like a death penalty case, and he was able to plea bargain. And the detectives was really happy with this. And this is the same detective that came to our home. He was happy with the results because he said that he would have to do at least 3/4 of his time. Where normally, you know, in a normal murder case, you do half your time and then you're eligible for parole.
So it was just first degree.
Yes, it was first degree.
Because sometimes they have those little, you know, manslaughter or whatever. But this was definitely premeditated.
Right.
That's what the first degree is, right? You have a plan, and
Correct.
you're going to rob this guy, and you kill him in the process of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is something we found out later on, but it was just really hard to process. He had a long history of crime and everything, and he had just came out of prison like 3-4 months, and that's kind of what really I think makes my journey that much more important, you know. And what it is, it's I got involved with what's called restorative justice, and restorative justice is an alternative to punishment. I personally feel that you're not going to take one out to replace the other, but you're going to bring these two together. And sometimes, you know, maybe it's just a broken kid that really needs, you know, a little bit of
how
more
do you
compassion.
get to that place, though? You know what I mean? This is the part where it's hard for me to comprehend. Not hard for me to comprehend to be forgiven, right? Because
Yeah.
as a believer, we know that God has forgiven us. It's very easy to say that, though, right? But you talk about being hateful, being overly suspicious of black people, and I'm not going to say that's right, but it is a reasonable thought that if your brother gets violently murdered by a particular race, you're going to have like one eyebrow up wherever you go, maybe, and some hate's going to well up in you.
Well, I connected with a pastor in Compton, and my whole reason to connect with him was to have this pastor kind of mentor him should he parole and come to Los Angeles. And this pastor invited me to, well, I don't know the name of the high school, but it's in Compton. It's a high school in Compton, and we were going to teach the young men how to put on a necktie. And the pastor had a meeting, and I found myself driving in Compton, and it's nighttime. And that's what my brother did. He left that night, and he went to a black neighborhood. And then I kind of, the trauma kind of kicks in. So here we are, 2019. So, I guess 29, 30 years have passed. And here I'm asking myself, like, how did I let my guard down? Now I feel so unsafe. And there's this feeling inside that it's not a feeling of fear, but there's this feeling inside that's just like super unease. And it's just like, you know what, I don't belong here. I don't feel comfortable. And it's crazy because when I walked into that church, there were 50 black men, nobody else of another race. And these guys greeted me with lots of love, and all my feelings is like, you know what, it's a betrayal because it's not what I think, but that trauma takes me to those places.
Yeah. I think the trauma always catches up to you, right? And even it catches you on different times, right? You can be fine.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're driving through a predominantly black neighborhood.
Yeah.
And boom, it just hits you. And I think sometimes maybe you didn't acknowledge it before, or maybe you did acknowledge it, but in a bad way, or maybe you just acknowledge it by not going in those areas.
Yeah. It's a broadside. I mean, like I said, it comes up unexpectedly. And, for me, I just feel like, there's certain things about myself that's broken that maybe I can't fix, and just got to say like, okay, I just got to, when I'm struggling in the moment, I'm struggling in the moment,
That's very hard for a lot of people to accept, huh? I think
so.
Yeah, I think even as believers, right? We think we can overcome anything. And I always think about Paul, and he's asking that, can you remove this from my side?
The thorn.
Yeah, and we don't know what it was, right? It's just whoever you talk to, they have a different. It could be an ailment, sickness, whatever it may be. But the Lord says no. Right. I mean, and I'm like, well, can you take this away? Like, I want to take this pain away, take this thing away, so I don't have to deal with it no more. But in a way, that little thorn in your flesh, it kind of molds you, right?
Right. Yeah. So true. One of the things for me is, as you're going back, when you said, how long did I struggle? It takes me back to the mid-'90s. Something happened in the mid-'90s. I got to meet my older cousin, and again, this is the cousin that was in the neighborhood, and he left. He actually moved out of state and made himself a good life, and he had a turning point in his life. But now in the 90s, it's kind of like when the internet was really starting to take off and stuff like that. So I started finding stories on my cousin on the internet, and these stories weren't nice. They said a lot of bad stuff, and I got to meet this cousin for the first time, and what I saw was I saw a man that loved my aunt, his mother, and loved his wife, loved his children, and so he connected a human side to those that have committed offenses and crimes. And the next one was Ruben Rangel. Ruben was a young man in my Bible study.
Wait, so your cousin?
My cousin.
Infamous
In
the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking.
Yes.
The story.
Yeah.
He killed somebody too.
He killed somebody.
We won't say who he killed, but he killed somebody too. So that's pretty.
And it was high profile.
It was very high profile. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And this was in the early 70s. So when all this happened, I was just a I don't know, 3-4-year-old kid.
So you see his life in 40 years later,
Pretty much, yes.
From the crime. He's out. You see him, and then a common friend, a friend that I hung out with for a few years and know very well, Ruben Rangel.
Yeah.
So
I was Ruben's Bible study leader. Ruben got married in my house.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of connections to Ruben. And
I spent the night at Ruben's house, hung out with him, went to the beach, graffiti with him, just loved his mother, sister, knew his family. His family was from the neighborhood too.
Right.
Fernando and them.
Yeah. Yeah. And Linda had asked me if I would write a letter.
So Ruben, for everybody out there, got caught up in the life, drugs, end up murdering somebody, sitting on death row right now.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He's been there for over 20 years now.
Yeah, I think it was late 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's been there 20 years. I maybe 2 years ago was in contact with him, and but he's been there for a long time.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
So you connected with Ruben again?
Yeah. Well, what happened was after the crime, his mother had asked me if I would write a letter on his behalf, and it was just kind of a natural thing. Yeah, of course I would do that. What ends up happening is I get subpoenaed into the courthouse. Me and Pastor Phil Hernandez, and I get called up to the stand, and I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, Pastor Phil's a more experienced. He's the pastor, and I'm just the leader here. But all of that was just like God setting up the stage for me. So
because I'll be honest with you, like, I love Ruben, but he got caught up, and he did a crime,
right?
And it's just bad.
Yeah,
it was bad. Him and his friend.
Sure.
They murdered somebody, and I remember you going there and testifying, and I remember almost telling myself, like, I love the guy, and I feel sorry for all his situation in life because he didn't have a very good life. He lived a rough life, and but I thought when you went to testify, even when Pastor Phil, like, what do you say, and how do you vouch for somebody that
yeah, well, that's crazy because when I got called to the witness stand, that was like, I felt so uncomfortable. Like, I represent, if anything I side with the victims.
Because of your brother.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm not going to sit here and speak on behalf of a murderer. But when I saw Ruben and he saw me, our eyes looked upon each other. His face lights up. There's a big smile on him. And it's like, yeah, that's Ruben. That's my friend. That's somebody I care about, And
I think a lot of people don't understand that aspect, right?
Right.
Like when I contacted, when we had a little contact there for a minute, I thought about him, and I was like, man, we had a lot of good times. It was fun.
Yeah,
we had laughs. He was my friend, and we kind of became distant because he got on drugs, and he just went back to his life, and he was messed up there for a while.
Yeah,
and
we lost him to society. And the influence of society.
Yeah, it caught up to him really, really bad, and I mean, quickly too. Which he was doing good. I worked with him.
He was doing great.
We worked in Vernon together.
Yeah.
I forgot about that too.
Yeah.
We work out, lifted weights. We just hung out all the time. But when he started going down, he went down pretty fast and got caught back up into life over there in Compton, where he was from. And but I think, like you say, it's very hard because you think like I was torn because he's my friend. We had a good time. His mom's been through a lot and has hung in there. Carmen, his sister, and then but then you hear about the crime, and it was no like well, he could have done it, or it's a bad rap. It was
yeah.
They were pretty much guilty of that crime, and it was tough. And but I did see a human side, and it was just it's just a hard thing to really like the crime and then the friend and the crime or the family, and I could see where you see his face and you're like, gee, I know this young guy, and he was young.
Yeah,
he was very young.
Yeah. One thing for me is that today, as I've gone into the prisons, I've sat with men, 28 men, and 20 of the 28 have a murder case. Either they murdered somebody, most of them murdered somebody, and then some of them are just, an accessory to the crime. I mean, they were involved, but they weren't actually the murderer. And I find that the majority of our prisoners, they've murdered somebody. And so in that regards, I do feel that Ruben got a bad rap, because I don't think his crime, it was much different than the other crimes that are not on death row. So that's where I would kind of separate that category, because it's pretty clear what's, how somebody qualifies for the death penalty. I mean, it's usually elderly murders, murders of children, those in law enforcement, those with multiple killings. Yeah. And I feel that he had really bad representation. He had a lawyer that I felt didn't care. So
just take a plea. That's another problem, right? Yeah. In the justice system, I don't necessarily. I always say this. I don't necessarily see it as a race thing all the time, which is there has been cases, but I mostly see it as an economical thing.
Sure.
If you don't have the funds,
right,
you're more in trouble. No matter if you're black, you're Hispanic, a minority, you'll be okay if you have money. Because I think a lot of, even if you're white, right, you'll be okay if you have money. But if you're a poor white guy,
right,
poor Hispanic, poor black, the odds are very, very much stacked against you.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
So I think it more than a race thing, it's an economical thing where, like, you don't have no dough, then you're just going to get whoever we give you.
Right. Well, like my cousin, going back to him, his case was like a high profile. And I think it was a civil rights activist. This is the only case he took on that was criminal, but I think he was already a well-known person.
Right.
So because it was high profile, he kind of got bigger support. And then after he was released from prison, there was another charge on him, and he was looking again at some serious prison time. And the person who's his wife today, she came from a family of lawyers, and the father-in-law ended up putting up a lot of money, and they had a lot of money, and it resulted in his freedom. So yeah, I think money definitely plays a role.
Yeah. So you start working in the prisons. You testify at Ruben's hearing, and here you are, a victim. Do you think like God was trying to set you up a little bit, because he made you from a victim, angry, and then now you're kind of seeing it from the culprit's side, where it's like, okay.
Yeah, well, my brother's death, God is all knowing. So because he's all knowing, he already knows the story, how it's going to unfold. So I kind of always feel like when I'm sitting there in the most horrific pain that I can experience and trauma, the God's saying, hold on, see what I'm going to do with this story, in the next 30 years, And so,
okay, so you have to learn that over time.
Yeah, I mean, there's just it's a waiting period,
especially if you have multiple deaths in your family,
right?
We experienced one. My uncle, he just passed. It's very shocking, but
right.
It's very hard to accept it, but you get to a point of it took me a long time to not accept my dad's death, but to really, process it.
Right.
Where you kind of go, okay, this is God's will.
Yeah.
God's not only God's will, but God's perfect will.
Yeah.
That I don't understand just quite yet. And I tell everybody I wasn't really at peace with his death till this past year, 20 years later.
Right.
I was like,
sure,
okay, like,
yeah, for me, if I meet a victim and they're angry, and I've met a few, I mean, and
sure.
there's no judgment, because it's like, what, I understand that emotion, I lived in that, so to me it's like, what, I'm even with my brothers, my journey, I've kind of kept it a little bit private, but I've been a little bit open as well, and I don't tell my brothers this is the right way and your way's the wrong way. It's just my path. That's what I tell them. This is my journey. This is my path. And that helps, I think, because there's no judgment, that I let my brothers express themselves as what's really true in their heart. And but I get to share, what's what's the benefit, I guess, that I've experienced,
Right.
And they get to see that.
I think everybody's journey is different. So you're different. Your journey is definitely different than your brother's because you decided you were going to forgive this man.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to my cousin and Ruben, when I saw that these are human beings, these are people with feelings and emotions, just like you and I, they're no different. They're not a monster. They're not, something created out of a horror story. This is real people. So I started to soul search for what about the man that killed my brother, the man that caused so much pain to me directly.
Did that bother you? I mean, it had to be like God, like, hey, what about that guy? And you're just like, that's different.
Yeah,
you kind of want to compartmentalize that guy. Like, this is Ruben, this is my cousin.
Right. Well, definitely, I think us as human beings, we definitely, put those in compartments and says, you know what, that one's too personal, and that one, he is the monster. He is the guy that done the heinous crime. He's the violator. He's the one that's robbed us. So, so we put that in a compartment that maybe forgiveness is an open subject, but not as it relates to this person.
Right.
So yeah, so I think that's where it became really personal.
And how do you relate to the people that out there that say, no, that guy is a monster, or Ruben is a monster, or your cousin is a monster. They killed somebody. That they're evil. Is there? And I ask this because is there a difference? And I think we can say there's a difference between a Richard Ramirez, right, and your brother's murderer, right? I think maybe you're kind of like, well, Richard Ramirez, come on, how many people?
Yeah.
A Jeffrey Dahmer,
right.
Okay, like, yeah, he's evil. Like, sorry, buddy,
yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's people that say, hey, they're the same.
Yeah. It's interesting because as God has opened doors for me to go into the prison, I've gone in the mix and in the presence of broken people. And I tell Dina, my wife, the broken we can mend and we can fix. But I don't know if I can handle going in the presence of evil people. And I haven't stepped into that realm. But I just kind of soul search, how would I handle that? And what I perceive to be evil, and maybe it's not really evil, it's just another broken person. I don't know. I mean, I haven't come across that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the Richard Ramirez, I mean, in my mind process that, that man was straight up evil.
So are these mistakes? Are these like one bad mistake? I mean, I mean, like with Ruben, I can see like, man, messed up that day. Like only if he turned right instead of going right, or only if it wasn't high or right. Wasn't on drugs or whatever it may be. If your cousin didn't run into that guy, I mean, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Right. If he didn't get caught or chased, right. Maybe that wouldn't have happened. Right. I mean, it just seems like when you get set up like your brother did, it seems like, okay, this is premeditated. Yeah. He was trying to do it for a couple weeks. It looks right. Like he wanted that ride. He wanted this.
Right.
I mean, how do you process that?
Yeah. And what happened to me that really helped was that once I started this journey, I got a hold of transcripts. So for the first 25, 29 years, here is a crime and a man held responsible for the crime. And that's basically all the information you have. And then you're looking at his behavior, his demeanor, his character, his record. I mean, and that's all you got, and I mean, my memory of him, the last image I had was a cold, callous killer, that had no regards, that had no respect for life, that had no respect for nobody.
It just makes it worse, right?
Yeah, he was a hardened guy, I mean, I remember that detective, he said, this is a type of guy, you lock him up and you throw away the key. Mm. And when he said that, man, those words sounded good to me. It's like, yeah, go for it. But it's much deeper than that, because when I got a hold of those transcripts, we started seeing from his youth and when he was a young kid, all the stuff that kind of led to that moment in his life. And what I kind of formulated as I read all that is that particular night, this guy was an angry person. and all that anger that he had bottled in, it all was released on my brother. So
now you're reading transcripts. What are some of the things that are catching your eye on the transcripts that are just like turning something inside of you?
Actually, it was a story that he told me that really turned things around. But when he was a little boy, there was an officer, a white officer, that unwarrantedly slapped his grandmother, and I think that's where the hatred started, And then he committed a crime in Texas, and the way Texas dealt with him is they kicked him out, so there was no rehabilitation. And then he comes to California, and California was known as the California Departments of Correction, so the CDC. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he became governor, that he added the R to it, which is rehabilitation. So it's California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So back then, it's like they didn't offer rehabilitation. So you did your time, or you're sentenced to 6 years, and you do 3 years, and then they cut you loose. So there was just punishment, no rehabilitation, no programs, and I think these guys come out even more hardened. Every time they come out, it just escalates. And I would say that was true in his life, that there was no program, no reaching out, nobody cared about him, and all the negative, all the attention that he got was only from the negative behaviors.
Man. And so your heart's beginning to soften for this guy?
Yeah, it helped me to see him more in a human light. Yeah, definitely took me to another place.
And are you sharing this with anybody? Are you sharing this with your brothers? Like, hey, maybe we can forgive this guy, or you know what I mean? Like, are you? Because that had to be a complicated thing, right?
Yeah, very complicated. I mean, it's very fragile too, because I'm obeying the Lord. And that's the first and foremost. And really, I don't seek man's approval for obedience. So there's not a lot of options, in my view, for this. But I feel it's very fragile, because I know we're called to love one another, but I'm not going to love this person above my family. I mean, the bloodline and the family, and, that old saying, blood is thicker than water. That was very fragile for me, especially with my brothers.
Yeah, because so you are getting a softened heart for this guy to the point of what?
To the point, well, first it was my initial letter. It took place in 2015, and I wrote to him, and I had three things that I wanted to send. My message was 3 points. The first point was that there's a God out there that loves him, and the second point was that this God that I serve wants to free him of guilt and shame that he's maybe been carrying all these years. And then the third one is that the God I serve requires for me to forgive.
Oh,
so
that how long was that process though of you saying, I from the initial idea of I should write him a letter? I mean, you had to be torn back and forth.
Yeah, I remember going back to 2010 that I was processing that, and I just didn't know how to reach out. Actually, it's real simple on the computer. And Brother Augie came into our church. He was a youth offender, committed murder. And him and I got into a conversation.
So God put somebody else in your path.
Yeah, so here's another component, and it was Brother Augie that connected me to him. I mean, he found him on the inmate locator. And, I was all like...
You're like, dang it.
Yeah, no, I was all gung-ho, like ready to go. And he's like, slow down. He goes, I'm going to connect you with Victim Services. There's a program. I had no idea. Victim Services, I think, came into effect in 1988. So my brother passed in 86. So there was no Victim Services. But the California Departments of Corrections have an office for Victim Services. And they're just...
What do they do?
They're a support. I mean, they'll connect you to support, to programs. And then... They would encourage, if you're ready, to do this victim offender dialogue, because this has to be supported by the CDCR. So it took 2 years. In 2017 was when I walked into Solano State Prison, where he was housed, and got to sit down, spend a good solid 6 hours with him.
So you talked to him first? I mean, you wrote the letter
to him, and we kept the dialogue from that point forward.
How long did it take him to write you back?
Well, it takes a while for the letter to clear, and then it will probably take about another week. So probably a good 3 weeks.
So he wrote you back
pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember that first day, and that's where it was a big turning point for me, because he wrote the letter, and I live in Whittier, and I was driving to Ontario, and that whole drive, I cried for my brother as if he had just died. So I realized, like, I had a hurt tucked in so deep in my heart that I didn't even know existed. So now here I am, thinking like, wow, I need healing, and the way I see this story is that it was 100% about him and his eternal soul, but it was 100% about me and my healing. So it put me in a whole different category, because I never thought it was about me. I always thought it was all about him and his eternal soul.
Do you think, there's something great about forgiving somebody, and we forgive people for stuff all the time. I would say dumb stuff, right?
Or we hold a grudge for dumb stuff.
Or we hold a grudge for dumb stuff, right? And that stuff that's trivial sometimes if we really think about it. But here, and I know a lot of people are going to ask that, is your forgiveness, is it just because God said for you to forgive? Or was you wanting to forgive because you just felt like you needed some sort of closure, some sort of healing?
I'm going to say it was the first, because I think God was setting me up with. That was Reuben and my cousin. See,
that's so rough. But see, I think that's the way the Lord works, right?
Yeah.
Like He was like softening you up with those things and showing you things, and then you were seeing a human element like to these guys, and it kind of works that way. I think if He would have just dropped it on you, hey, forgive.
Right.
I think it would have been a lot harder for you to. Yeah. Man, Lord, that's a tough one. But when He puts a little bit of people in your path to kind of soften that blow, even Augie, and he murdered somebody too, and now he's right in your face now.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to comprehend, but I can see where you're coming from, where it's like, this is not overnight. We're talking 30, definitely 25, 30 years.
Yeah, God was doing the work in me.
And are you telling God at any point, like, stop?
Yeah,
I can't forgive. I know what you're saying, Lord, but can I just keep them over there, and we'll be over here?
Yeah, no, I've had these what I call like unreasonable conversations with God.
Yeah,
like
the human element. This is the human element. The human element is the best thing to me in the Bible, right? It's like Ananias when God says, "Go to Paul," and he's like, "You know who that guy is."
Right.
But there is a human element to
like, I remember when I was in the foreign field, we were language learning, and I hit a wall in learning, and I'm like, that was a different form of struggle, and I'm just like, man, God, I'm having such a hard time right now. And I said, I've gone through a lifetime of suffering. I should be exempt from suffering. And that's my conversation with the Lord. Is like, you need to exempt me now. From here on, I should have a blissful life.
Take this thorn out of my side.
Yeah. And then we get news that our daughter has cancer. So it's like, okay, this is the journey of life. We're just gonna, again, just pile upon pile, and actually, the people that we admire, the warriors that we admire, these are the guys that's been through a lot of stuff,
right.
And it's like, wow, okay, if this is what it takes to be a warrior, then bring it. Let's do it,
So you ride him, you have some correspondence for a couple years, and then you decide to meet him.
Yeah, what happened was we were planning to leave the country, and I had wrote to him and I said, hey man, I think it's time for us to do a face-to-face. What do you think? And his response was like, I owe you everything. I don't want to ever offend you, and I don't want to lose you. But he's like, I don't know if I can do this. And then I wrote back and said, you're never going to offend me, but I'm planning to leave the country. So there's a window of time that I don't know what's going to happen. And that's when he connected me to these programs, the Restorative Justice. And it was the greatest thing, because this program gave me a one-on-one on because I was going to go with the general population and just go have a visit, but it would be a room full of people, and the setting wouldn't be right, the environment wouldn't be right, and we got a private sit-in, and it was the whole day.
Wow.
So it was the dynamics was like multiplied in a greater way.
And what are you feeling when you first see him?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Dina was supposed to be my support person. So Dina and I were supposed
Your
to
wife.
come. My wife, yes. She was supposed to come with me, but because our daughter Anna was, fighting cancer, it kind of changed up the plans. So I ended up bringing Bill Hall with me, which is,
Bill Hall, he was on here.
yes.
So if you haven't watched the Bill Hall episode, go watch it. But once again, God puts you with a guy that was doing life.
Yeah.
Doing life.
Yeah. Oh, he was like the perfect guy to come. Because Bill was, he was 100% my support person.
Oh, man.
But at the same time, he had so much love and compassion. As those who know Bill, I mean, he's just an incredible man.
Yeah, I mean, amazing guy. Been through it all. Was dead man walking. That's what he always says, right? He's on death row.
Yeah, right.
Right? More than life. And then sends you, Bill, to hang out with you. And once again, God is putting people with you.
Yeah, and we had like a 6-hour drive up to Vacaville.
With Bill, I mean, it's just like you're just convicted talking to him. I mean, he just is
stories after stories.
Right.
I mean,
you just feel like
stuff.
I mean, he's personal wise, Bill is the most humblest, meekest guy. Spiritual wise, he's a giant.
Yeah. Yes, he is.
And you talk to him for any amount of time, and you just feel refreshed and feel like you can do anything, and feel like the Lord's in control of everything, which he is.
And Bill's been through stuff.
Yes.
So because of that, I wasn't worried about misrepresenting Bill, but I was worried about misrepresenting the Lord. And when I got that letter that I shared with you, that I had an unexpected emotion of all this hurt, I started to process like, well, what if there's anger tucked in somewhere that I don't even know exists, and then what if it manifests, And I kind of scoped the room. There was
a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if these feelings are raw and true, I mean, I can't deny it, and I can't pretend that they don't exist. So I was thinking like, okay, how am I going to respond? And so I saw some vending machines. I said, you know what? I'm just going to get up. I'm going to excuse myself, and I'm going to walk away. I mean, so I had all these things like a escape plan, you could say. And the whole meeting went. It ended, and there was no hurt. There was no anger in my heart.
Wow.
And I remember looking at Bill Hall and telling him, hey, mission accomplished. And the mission that was accomplished was that I didn't shame the Lord. That's how I was feeling. Like, I don't want to shame the Lord, and I have an outburst of anger. And you know what? It's crazy because this guy had the same expectation. He felt like, how can this guy come at me with love and acceptance,
He had to be nervous.
Yeah. Oh, he was extremely nervous. Yeah, because they gave us the choices. Like, I can walk in on him or him walk in. It's like, no, I want him to walk in. So we were already seated, and I'm watching him take that long walk to that table where we were at. Yeah, and I could see the nervousness that he was carrying. It's just, and I've seen that a lot. It's a repeated picture as I go into the prisons, because when they see me, it's like I'm a little guy. I'm not as little as my dad, but I'm a little guy. And some guy was telling me like, yeah, I'm so scared. My heart is beating out of my chest. And I'm thinking, he's not afraid of me. There's nothing scary about me. But that fear that they're facing is that they're facing their guilt and their shame.
Wow.
And that's a big step. I mean, for me, he always says, it took a lot of courage for what you've done, but it took a lot of courage on his end for what he did.
Yeah, to face it, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it takes a big man to face it.
It's easy to hide behind the prison walls because everybody else has done pretty much the same thing. Some crime and so you're sitting along with another guy that murdered somebody, and it's not a big deal. But to face, the family, or the person that was close to a family member that got murdered, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
So you have this conversation, you hang out for hours.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the very first thing I did is I took hold of his hands, and in that moment I prayed. I prayed for those hands, because as my hands touched those hands, it's like, this was the instrument that caused devastation to my family. This is the instrument that caused so much pain. And my prayer was, Lord, let there be a transformation, a new identity to those hands. And my prayer was that in every handshake that they would feel warmth, and every hug and every touch, and because this is what the hands do. I mean, and that it would have a different identity was my initial prayer with this guy.
I mean, it's humbling for anybody. And for somebody like him, for a guy to say, I forgive you, and then to come and pray and meet with him and to give him some forgiveness, I guess, that's huge. How did you feel after that? I mean, as far as you and God?
You know what I felt? I felt that I pleased the Lord. My obedience pleased the Lord. So yeah, it's a good feeling. It's kind of crazy because too, when he was coming up, our facilitator, she asked the question, like, do you want to give him a hug? And I'm thinking, like, no way, and the reason why I felt that is like, a hug's a personal thing. And it's like, I'm not ready to get personal like that with him.
Yeah.
But as the meeting ended, there was a hug at the end, and it was genuine. It was the real stuff,
Wow.
And, and he had the opportunity to look at me in the eyes and say how sorry he is, And at first it's like, it's okay, but then I realized, like, wait, this is a big moment right now for both of us, and let me take in the magnitude of the words that he's telling me, because it was a sincere, I'm sorry, and the most difficult thing is that you can do something and regret it, and you can live with regret for the rest of your life, but it'll never change the event that happened, because it happened, and he could never undo what he did. But, today he can rewrite his story by doing good things in life, and that's my hope.
Do you think that a lot of guys they don't want to recognize or admit, hey, I'm sorry? It's very hard for a lot of guys to admit that. They become calloused and more bitter over their crime and their sentence. Sure. And through the years, it's kind of hard for them to really say, hey, I'm genuinely sorry, and I made a mistake. And he didn't have there was no benefit for him, right? Right.
And then in this program too, it doesn't go in his file. So it's not like to his credit that he accomplished this. It's a closed file. So, and that's really, the CDCR does that intentionally to make sure that the person that's doing it is doing it out of sincere motives.
Yeah,
there's no manipulation. There's no gain. There's nothing that favors them, which I think is a big deal,
Right. So the letter, the forgiveness, the meeting, you're feeling good. But that's not where it ends, right? With you and this guy.
No. After this, what happened was I got invited to go into the prisons. So I was placed on a journey of being able to give my testimony inside the prisons. And that's just put me in a whole different, it's kind of crazy because the restorative justice is not a religious group. So it's cool because now you got people of all kinds of faiths. I mean, we got Muslims, you got Buddhists, you got non-believers, atheists, and they're all in the mix, and they're my audience, and they give me the freedom to share my story any way I want. And my story really is about Jesus, because you take the Lord out and I would not have this story.
Where would you be?
I'd be sitting in anger and hatred.
For 35 years.
Yeah, and probably trying to formulate a way for revenge. I mean, that's the reality of I think, how we lived as a family. I mean, we have a history of revenge.
Wow.
Revenge and harm. And our family has harmed people, and harm has come back to our family. So I think, you look at where I come from, and it's almost like it's like a natural equation of where I would be without the Lord.
Wow. The message of forgiveness that you speak in these prisons, what does it do for these prisoners?
Oh, it's crazy, man. It's I've literally sat with these men and I've watched them cry.
Hard-hearted men.
Yeah. I mean, if there's a place you have to have your guard, that's the place. And if you have to, again, even pretend that you're tough, that's the place. and yet I see these guys like completely vulnerable, completely true. And one of the things about the prison system that I've only been exposed to those that are in the programs. So I can't make a judgment that this is the way people are. But I've gone all the way to the max level. So it's a level 4, level 3, level 2, level 1. And then I've gone into the special needs yard, which is the protective custody. And what I see, if I'm in a level 4 or the special needs, I see people that are just hungry for change. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you believe that every guy can be rehabilitated if given the opportunity or the circumstance?
I believe that the majority can. I think there's some people that are just evil. I think there's people that don't want to change. I mean, there's some people that connected with our family and in the neighborhood that I see don't want to change. I mean, one in particular, he's been incarcerated for more than 40 years. He's in the Supermax at Pelican Bay. I mean, that says a lot, that he doesn't want the programs, but if I had the chance, and actually somebody was talking about, maybe taking the programs into Pelican Bay, which I think they're not offered right now. So Pelican Bay is called Supermax. So it's not just maximum security. It's above the max.
Right.
And, so would I give him the opportunity? If he let me, I would give him the opportunity to maybe even have a one-on-one with him, And those are things that almost like our dreams that are far-fetched, but I'm seeing that in my journey with the Lord, that it's in the realm of possibility.
Do you think that the victim or the victim's family should have some say in what happens? Do you think that's always a good thing?
Yeah, I definitely do. Yeah.
Why?
Because why do we have the death penalty? For example, okay, the death penalty is a message that we hold life at the highest level of respect and sanity. So life is so valuable that you had no right to take, and therefore we're going to give such punishment. I mean, so when you look at it that way, and a victim is capturing that, saying, you know what, you had no right to do what you did. It puts everything into that perspective. Sometimes I feel that a victim, sometimes our pain is so great that nothing could ever match or justify or bring it to a place like, okay,
I think we think that one for one, right?
Yeah.
He took us, we took him.
Yeah.
And now we're even. And
right,
it doesn't
never
work,
does.
right?
No.
It's never worth it.
No. And I'll tell you, in 2020, he was released from prison. I happened to be in Brazil at the time, and I was just processing. I was hit with all kinds of unexpected emotions. One was I almost kind of felt like a little bit guilty that maybe I played a role in supporting him for his release, because I had attended his parole hearing in 2018 and then in 2019.
In favor of him?
In favor of him.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is another thing that's huge.
Yes. And it's not common.
So now you're not only forgiving him, but you're kind of putting your forgiveness into action, kind of like, okay,
right.
Well, we're going to go the extra step.
Yeah. I
See, that's even heavier for me too. It's one thing to write the letter, to meet him, to know that he's in jail, he's doing his time. I forgave him, Lord.
Yeah.
We're good.
Right.
But it's a whole nother thing when you go like, now I'm going to kind of speak on his behalf.
Right. Yeah. Well, the scripture talks about reconciliation, and reconciliation is basically that man is an offender, and we've made offenses towards God, and yet God treats us like if we never caused this offense. So it's almost like going to that level of depth with this man. Yeah. And I'm not saying that like I erased what he did, because that part, I have never ever told him it's okay what you did, because it's not, and it'll never be okay, but it's okay to heal. That's the message, and it's okay to kind of move forward. And so in 2020 I was dealing with this emotion, and guilt, and there was a lot for me to process, a lot. And then in 19, when he was found suitable, we had an amazing moment. We had a female correctional officer. She's giving me hugs, and they're blown away by the whole thing. And even we had the prosecution side or representing the LA County, the DA's office, and then we had the defense lawyer on his behalf, and we're all sitting together in the same room, which is really like they separate. It's kind of like my team and your team type thing.
Right.
And, so there was this distance, and we all came together. So that whole day was like, it's an amazing day. But when I hit that parking lot, I felt like this big lump in my throat, and what I was dealing with, like the reality was hitting me that this man has been accountable for 34 years for my brother's death. And now, basically he's paid for his crime and he's no longer going to be held accountable. And that reality was a hard reality,
Right.
And same with my brothers. I mean, this subject, it opens up a lot of wounds that we have, And I tell people, like, I have a wound that I don't know if it'll ever close. But, every time I go into a prison and I see something that gives me great joy, I feel like there's a stitch right there, And I see hope that someday it can close. I mean, I've been invited to our state capitol. I've sat in the senator's office and given my testimony to the senator. I mean, I almost feel like the story of Paul, going to Rome, before the governors, and
Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's just like what a tremendous place. And I even got invited to a retreat. And there was the legislators were there. You had senators and assembly members, and here I am among all these people, and again, sharing my story, sharing my journey. That particular day, we went to a level 3 prison, which is Ironwood in Blythe, and there we actually went into the housing where the prisoners were housed.
Wow!
So they took us all the way deep into the interior, and then another. I think this is a cool story. In San Quentin, they call him LT, but it's Lieutenant Sam Robinson. And we were in his office and at the warden's office in San Quentin. And it's a short walk there to the gates of the prison, as we're going to go inside the prison. But in that short walk, I talked to him about, I said, they had just had me do a story and they published it in the San Quentin newspaper. And so I'm talking about, hey, this story, I go, it was Ruben Rangel that put me on he played a role in me going on this journey. And he goes, yeah, I know Ruben.
Wow.
And I said, well, do me a favor. I go, give him a message and tell him that story, he played a role in that story.
Wow.
And we ended up going to inside the prison, and we picked up a prisoner. There was a guard shack, and we didn't go past the guard shack. And then we ended up doing an interview that they were doing a live news media at the state capitol, and then we were live streaming from San Quentin. And the lieutenant said, this is the first of its kind because nobody's ever done this. So it's like, all right, this is cool. But the cool part of this whole story was when we finished, we went back to that guard shack, and the lieutenant let me pass in. And that's the second time that I saw the housing of the prisoners. And San Quentin, it's like rows and rows and stacked 5 high of just cell after cell after cell. But when I came out, that building had like an L shape. And he points over to that side and says, this is where we house our guys on death row. And I almost felt like he took me like steps away from Ruben. And it's like, man, I'm so close, but so far.
Right.
And I don't want to get political, but, right now we do have a movement with our DA, George Gascon. And, I think it's perceived as a little bit too liberal. But, one of the things he's doing is he's trying to work on removing enhancements, not trying youth as adults. He even said about those that are on death row that have been sentenced in LA County that he's going to reverse that, which that's Ruben again.
Right.
So I look at it in my prayer, man. I pray for Ruben. And I'm thinking, Lord, what's the realms of possibility? And all of this because I said yes. Can I rescue others? Right. Can I touch others' lives that normally maybe wouldn't be touched? Like the
Can you take this negative?
Yeah, and make it into a positive, I mean, and through this, because I said yes to God, it's connected me where maybe I can be a voice for Ruben and an advocate for Ruben. Maybe this hardened criminal in Pelican Bay, that maybe this is the story that's going to soften his heart. Because this individual that I'm sharing about, he knew my brother. They were neighbors. We were neighbors as kids, but I was too little. I don't know if he would remember me, but yeah, we all grew up right there in the same neighborhood.
Wow. Amazing story, man. It is hard for me to comprehend a little bit. I'll be honest. I think a lot of people, but I think the Lord has used you to soften my heart on a few things. I'm really, crime and punishment kind of guy. But I do have a soft spot, like for Ruben. I do have a soft spot for a guy like Augie or
Right.
Gabby's husband. That got life sentences as juveniles,
Right.
which I don't agree with that. I have friends that their cousins been in prison, committed, murder when they were 16, 17 years old, in gang warfare, where I'm not saying it's an out, but you're in warfare there amongst gang members, and it's killed or be killed, and they kill somebody, and they're sitting there for 30 years, never drove a car, never did anything.
Right.
So I do have a soft spot for that, but above all that, it's and what matters the most as a believer for me is the forgiveness part, because that weighs more than the political side.
Yeah.
It weighs more than the any movement or justice
Right.
movement or anything like that. It is the forgiveness side of what has God asked us to do, and I don't think there's any more forgiveness that you can give than somebody that's hurt you deep or hurt your family member.
Yeah.
If somebody hurt, my daughter or my wife or my sisters, I mean, that wound is going to be bad. And
Right.
But to hear you say how the forgiveness, and I do like the human side of it. It wasn't overnight. You do say, hey,
Yeah, it was definitely a process.
I had hate. I have feelings, and even now you say the feelings well up sometimes,
Right.
and you gotta put them back down. I think that's the human side of where I think a lot of people have to hear that part of the story too, where it's I have forgiveness, but it wasn't always easy.
Right.
And
it's been 35 years.
It's been a long time.
Again, the first 30 years, it was 29 years when I first wrote my first letter to him. So a lot of time has passed. A lot of time to think about it has passed.
Wow. Good stuff, man. I appreciate you coming out, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great.
Appreciate you coming out. We got one more thing. Well, I want to invite you back on, and we'll talk some of the political stuff. That would be cool, and some of the, you can really help break that down. A little bit of that. But we have one more thing on the podcast. It's a little thing we call the Furious Five. I know you watch the show. You told me you watch the show, so we have 5 furious questions that we need you to answer.
Okay.
All right. So, Street Gospel, Furious 5 with Trino Jimenez. If you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be?
Oh, I got to think about that. What would I change? I would change my height.
I knew you were going to say that. All right. I mean, hey, one thing about in jail, the stature doesn't matter, right? Because there's some little guys that are vicious, right? Number 2, if you had $1 million, what would you do with it right now? $1 million in your pocket. Somebody came up to you and gave it to you. What would you do with that?
I would go buy a home for my children.
Oh, man. Look at that, Aaron.
Yeah,
Lucky.
You didn't even have to think about that one.
Easy. I don't know. You might only be able to buy one in LA. You might have to be somewhere else, right?
A duplex or something.
An apartment building.
2 for 1, yeah.
Everybody can live in each apartment here. Question number 3. Your biggest success in life.
Biggest success in life.
So far.
Jeez. Giving my life to Christ.
That's it, huh?
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, because he's the one that sets the stage and the platform. I mean, I've had some incredible fun and incredible journey. And it's all because of him.
That's right.
My feet have touched places that's unthinkable.
Yeah, We didn't even get into the missionary side of this thing, but next time we get you on and talk about it some more. Crazy stuff. Question number 4. Big Dodger fan. All right, we got to wrap this up too, because the game's on.
Number 35, Kobe. For episode 35.
No. Episode 35. But if you could sit down with one Dodger, past or present, for dinner, who would it be?
Steve Yeager.
Steve Yeager, catcher.
Yes, sir.
Why Steve Yeager?
I don't know. He was my favorite as a kid growing up.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, mine as a kid growing up was Pedro Guerrero. I don't know why. I don't even speak Spanish.
Yeah.
I love Pedro Guerrero when I was little. And Davey Lopes. I like Davey Lopes. Fast base stealer.
Yeah.
But Steve Yeager. All right. Last question. Street Gospel Furious 5. Best piece of advice you can give to the audience?
I would say try forgiveness. If you've been hurt, try forgiveness, because forgiveness is not releasing that person who's harmed you, but it's really for your own personal healing. And that's something that I didn't understand and didn't expect until I stepped into it. So to me, it's like in anything. I mean, even if the small offenses, when you forgive, it's a releasing. So that would be it.
Try forgiveness.
Yeah.
Not for the person, but for yourself. Oof, what a concept, man. Hey, appreciate you coming out, man.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Chapter 7.
Anything you want to shout out? I know that some of these organizations you're involved with.
Yeah, there's Ahimsa Collectives.
Okay.
And there's ARC. ARC is big. They go into the hardcore places. We have Healing Dialogue and Action. And then there's Healing Hearts and Restoring Hope. That's with the Lord's Missions.
Okay.
Great bunch of people, man. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. There's some of faith and some that are not, but they're all good people, man. Doing good works.
Right on.
And
Appreciate
good works
you, man.
matters. Yeah. Thank you.
It does.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
It does.
Timothy talks about that. Yeah.
Once again, it's not always for those people, but it's for us inside. I'm sure when you go in there and you come out, you're feeling awesome.
Yep. Definitely.
Awesome. And there's no glory in it either, right?
No.
You're just going into a prison. It ain't like they're gonna take a picture of you and post it on their social media or anything like that.
Actually, right now I've been invited to do training to be a facilitator, and that training it's going to be on one-on-one. And what was given to me, I get to give to another set of people. But yeah, to me, it's about the one. Luke 15 talks about the one.
That's it. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Dave.
Appreciate you.